Hey guys, Meredith with ExtremeTerrain.com, and today we are checking out the Old Man Emu DAKR rear leaf springs for 2.5 inches of lift, fitting all 2007 through 2021 Toyota Tundras. Now, if you are experiencing symptoms of worn leaf springs that are bogging down your truck's performance and your truck's appearance, these DAKR leafs are a great solution. Now, with the 2.5-inch lift and the performance that these offer, this set of leaves is going to be great if you do any hauling, towing, or even just have heavy off-road gear in the back of your truck and want to lift up the rear while also replacing components that may be causing the problem. Now, that also makes it great if you have a lift currently that came with blocks and you either want to maintain the height by swapping those out with a full component, or you want to add to the height while also maintaining your springs. Leaf springs age like any suspension component, and when they do, since they're not as stiff as they once were, they start to create a squat, and this kind of U-bend starts to flatten, and it lets the back end sag, especially under load in those hauling and towing situations. Now, to combat this, these Old Man Emu springs will offer a high stress resistant design, yet will have a well-distributed progressive rate, which is just more of that comfortable day-to-day drivability rate that you would want out of a daily driver. So not only is it giving you performance, but it's also giving you that comfort. Now, the leaves will also have maintenance benefits to them to extend the lifespan with re-greasable nylon inner leaf friction pads that will keep them moving as they should, and it's going to reduce any noise that leaf springs sometimes encounter. These will be made of a tough steel that are draw tapered and diamond cut, which allows that progressive spring rate while being durable enough to handle the load. Now, on each of the leaves, these will have a graphite coated finish, and although these do have anti-friction pads, that coating will hold up well against friction and prevent any rust on the springs from forming over time. They will also have a military wrap on either end to keep the leaf spring together in the unusual event of failure for safety, and will have a flat axle seat area for proper positioning to provide some extra safety out of this, as well as a super tough construction. This set will cost you about $400, and in my opinion, it's a great investment for the benefits that you're getting. Now, what stands out most about this set is that these are specifically intended to lift your vehicle a couple inches to match any leveling kit or front suspension that you may already have, or simply add that height knowing that you're going to be towing or hauling regularly. It's also a full leaf compared to an add a leaf or a lift block if you want to invest a little more and address the issue at its source with a well-built set of springs that's going to be sure to provide the performance that you may be looking for and last for the long haul. Install will be a 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, and it should take you about 2 hours with the right tools and a setup in order to install these. However, at this point, we can head over to our shop and check out a detailed breakdown, whether you're doing this at home or you're just curious about the install. So that is going to wrap it up for my review. Let's go ahead and jump into it.
The tools you'll need for this project are a 1/2-inch drive impact gun, a 3/8 drive ratchet, a long 1/2-inch extension, a 1/2-inch swivel joint, a 12mm socket, a 17mm socket, a short 19, a long 19 socket, a 21mm socket, a 12mm, a 17mm, a 19mm wrench, a 1/2-inch breaker bar, a long pry bar, and your spare tire removal kit. Hi everyone, today we're installing a set of leaf springs on our Tundra, so let's get started with the uninstall of the stock springs. So first thing we're going to need to do is remove our spare tire. It is in the way of removing the shackles for the rear springs, so let's go ahead and get that done. We're going to be using the tools supplied with the vehicle, so we're just going to assemble this and lower our spare tire and get it out of the way. Now, if you're doing this on the ground using a set of jack stands, you want to make sure that the jack stands are supporting the frame and not the rear axle. Also, you want to make sure that you remove your rear wheels. Then the next thing we're going to do is remove 3 brackets that hold the parking cable to the frame and the rear axle. We need to do this to give us a little bit of extra room when we lower the axle to remove the spring. So we're going to use our 12mm wrench and remove 3 bolts on one on each of the brackets and get those loose so that we can go ahead and continue on. Now, next thing we're going to do is remove our lower shock mount bolt and disconnect our lower shock mount here. But before you do that, you want to make sure that your axle is supported by either a floor jack or, like in our case, since we're on a lift, a pole jack, something like that, to keep it from dropping once we remove this lower shock mount bolt. So we're going to use our 17mm socket and a 17mm wrench. Go ahead and remove that bolt. Now, if your truck has a sway bar such as ours does, we're going to need to disconnect the sway bar link from the frame so that we can swing that out of the way and give us better access to our leaf spring. So we're going to have to do this on both sides at the same time so that our sway bar can swing down. So we're going to be using a 21mm socket and remove that bolt. Next thing we're going to do is remove the 2 U-bolts that hold our axle and spring together. So we're going to remove the 4 nuts underneath here so that we can remove those bolts. So we'll be using our 19mm socket to take those nuts off. All right, now we can go ahead and lift our bolts up and remove our spring bumper as sitting on top of the springs as well. Now we're going to remove our front bolt on the spring here using our 19mm socket and a 19mm wrench. Now at this point, because of the weight of the spring and the tension that's on that bolt, you may have to do a little bit of manipulation, either by lowering or raising the axle, moving the spring side by side to finish getting that bolt out. So let's go ahead and finish that. Now we're ready to remove the rear of the spring, and to do that we've got to remove the 2 nuts on the shackle back here so that we can take the shackle out and lower the spring and then slide it out. So we're going to be using our 19mm socket to remove those nuts, and then we can go ahead and finish taking it out. All right, now at this point we can go ahead and remove the outer plate from our shackle and then remove our shackle towards the inside of the vehicle. Now, if you've got a buddy or an extra pair of hands, now would be the time to get them. If not, just be very careful because this spring is very heavy. Now you may need to use a small pry bar or flathead screwdriver to help pry this away. Now you may need a small pry bar to help slide this shackle out. And now we can go ahead and remove our spring. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and install the new spring on the driver's side here. The reason for that being is if you try and take off the passenger side spring, at this point, you're going to have so much instability with the differential moving side to side and all over the place. So we're going to do one side at a time. Once we get this one done, then we'll move to the other side. All right, now that we're ready to install our new springs, a couple things to note. One, you'll notice that there are several markings on these springs. The arrow points towards the direction of the front of the vehicle, so you know which end of the spring goes towards the front. The other thing is you have an O on this spring right here. The O typically means that it's over spec, which means it may be slightly longer or slightly taller than another spring. Now, this does not mean that it is a faulty spring. This is actually designed that way by the engineers. So if you see like an O on one spring and a minus sign on the other side, typically you would want to put the O spring on the driver's side since that's where the driver sits and it's going to have a little bit more weight on that side on a regular basis, so it'll kind of help even things out on the vehicle. So let's go ahead and get this installed. Now, because these new springs have a higher lift than what the stock ones came out as, we're going to need to adjust the height of our axle. So we're just going to lower this a little bit to give us the extra clearance that we need to get this installed. All right, now that we've got it lowered, we should be able to go ahead and get this put into place. All right, now we can go ahead and start assembling our rear shackle. So we'll go ahead and slide this through our frame and for the rear spring. Now we'll go ahead and slide our outside plate back on. Add our washer and our nut. Now we'll connect the front of the spring. All right, now that we're ready to connect the front of our leaf spring, you may find an issue where the bolts, where the holes don't quite line up correctly. In that case, you're going to need a pry bar or possibly an extra set of hands and kind of maneuver the spring forward or backwards, whatever you need to be able to get the holes lined up. Now we've already adjusted ours with a pry bar. We've moved it forward a little bit, so now we should be able to slide our bolt right through. And we'll put our washer and our nut on the other side. Now that should hold it in place so that we can go ahead and get our U-bolts reconnected between the spring and the axle. Now that we're ready to actually install our U-bolts and connect our springs to our axle housing again, you may want to take a look before you actually start this and make sure that your stock U-bolts are long enough to safely secure the spring to the axle housing. Now ours were a little short, so depending on your specific application, you may need to source longer ones. The ones that we've sourced are about an inch and a quarter longer than the stock ones, and they'll work just fine. Now you may or may not need to do this, so you'll have to check when you go to put them in. First thing we'll do is install our spring bumper over the center pin. First thing we'll do is install our spring bumper over the center pin, and we'll slide our U-bolts over the spring and over the bumper. Now we'll install our lower plate over our U-bolts. And then attach our nuts. And we'll snug them up with our 21mm socket. Now we can go ahead and tighten up the front bolt on our springs using our 19mm socket and our 19mm wrench. Now we'll tighten up the rear nuts. Now we can go ahead and raise our differential up high enough so that we can get our shock reinstalled in the lower mount. And now we'll tighten it up with our 17mm socket and our 17mm wrench. Now we can go ahead and re-secure our brackets for our parking brake line using the original hardware, and we'll tighten them all down using our 12mm socket. All right, now that we've got our driver's side completely reattached, now you can go ahead and repeat this whole uninstall and install process for the passenger side. Now, once you get that done, make sure you torque everything down to manufacturer recommended specifications. And then if you have a sway bar on your truck, that's when you can go ahead and reconnect this and then reinstall your spare tire. All right, with both of our springs installed, we can go ahead and reconnect our sway bar link up to our frame. So let's go ahead and get that done. And we'll tighten it down with our 21mm socket. And now you can do the same thing for the bolt on the other side. All right, now we'll go ahead and reinstall our spare tire. And that's a little difficult to get the camera underneath the truck. But you know how to install your spare tire again because you took it off just a little while ago. And that wraps up our review and install of the Old Man Emu Dakar 2.5-inch rear lift leaf spring for your 07 to 21 Tundra. Thanks for watching, and remember, for all things Tundra, keep it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.